Thank you everyone for coming out. I hope your finals are going well. I hope you're doing well, staying safe and healthy at the end of this crazy semester. Um, so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Elizabeth Yao. I'm the manager of Project Jumpstart. And we've been so lucky the past few weeks to have this series from Austin Pancner about functional health and wellness for musicians. So it's just been a really good thing for us to check in with ourselves about how we're doing physically and mentally. And Austin is a doctoral trombone student here at Jacobs. He has just finished his coursework, which is so exciting. And that means that he's able to launch even more into this amazing project that he's created, which is about injury prevention and health and wellness targeted towards musicians. So Austin, do you want to take it away for our last session of the semester?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And huge shout out to Project Jumpstart for making these sessions happen. Without your support and without your willingness to support and promote your students' well-being and creativity, this would not be possible. So huge thank you out to that organization of the music school. So today we're going to be talking about performance-related injuries, the what, how, and the various habits we can do and implement to our lives to prevent them. For those of you that are new, my name is Austin Pancner, doctoral student at the Jacobs School of Music, and this series is all about adaptation, change, and growth. And this came about due to this COVID-19 situation. It's causing all of us to be isolated and all of us to really almost not reinvent ourselves, but really check in with ourselves, check in with our needs, our habits, and our health so we can promote sustainable growth during this time, because we do not know how long this situation is going to last, unfortunately. So just a little bit more about myself. I've been pursuing health and wellness for the past 3 years. I've experienced 3 performance-related injuries throughout my career, 2 in my master's and 1 in my doctoral degree. During my doctoral degree, the performance-related injury was so bad I contemplated just switching careers and not playing music altogether, but I'm really glad I pushed through. I'm really glad I was able to figure this out on my own, and hopefully I can give back some kind of valuable information that people can take away. So this led me to create the Functional Musician. The Functional Musician is an online health and wellness platform on Instagram and Facebook, and we have our site, thefunctionalmusician.com, and basically we help integrate sustainable health and wellness habits for musicians. We base our programs around workouts, functional workouts, mobility, nutrition, and blend them together into this holistic way to approach your health and wellness habits. We actually just recently launched a 30-day wellness challenge yesterday, and this is geared around strength training, mobility, health and wellness habits, and we track all of those things, and we have some great prizes lined up. All you have to do is participate and actively show up to improve your health. So that is very cool. I encourage everybody to check that out. The registration to sign up ends a week from yesterday, so May 11th. So last week we talked about stress, and particularly I hope everybody remembered stress plus rest equals growth. And I just wanted to briefly review / touch upon something that I wanted to talk about but did not put in my presentation, and that is planning your recovery period. If you are experiencing high amounts of stress over the long term and you are going down pretty rapidly on this burnout scale, planning a recovery period is essential for your sustainable growth, because once we reach burnout, it's going to take a lot of our resources, a lot of our time, and a lot of our willpower to recover from that burnout. So that's something we want to avoid. And by planning recovery periods sporadically throughout our yearly schedule, annually, we can just get ourselves to a place where we're reaching that sustainable growth over the long term. So just a couple of things as we plan our recovery period. Number one, just like every single presentation that I've given this over the past 6 weeks, everybody is different. Everybody recovers differently, and everybody rests differently. So keep that in mind. You know yourself better than anybody. So when we're planning our recovery periods, generally we want to plan from 1 to 4 weeks, depending on your level of fatigue or where you're at on the burnout scale. The farther you out on the burnout scale, the more time you're going to need to fully recover and get to your optimum state of brain function and physical function as well. For the recovery period, it's always better to overplan your time rather than underplan your time. But life happens. For example, right out of school, if you were accepted into a prestigious summer music festival that happens 2 weeks after school gets out, that kind of dampens the amount of rest you're going to be able to use after your periods of heightened stress. So in that case, that you have to strategically plan for small amounts of period of rest. But if you have a huge, let's say you're finishing your master's program and you have a semester where it's the most stressful semester of your life, and by the end of it, you're feeling burnt out, and you only have 2 weeks of recovery before you go to that music festival, 2 weeks of recovery is going to give you some boost in your willpower and some boost in your function, and you may get halfway through the festival before those feelings of overwhelm and anxiety return. But I mean, life happens, and that's a very great opportunity. So I'm not saying you would sacrifice that for rest and recovery. No, you would do your best in that situation and kind of forget the rest and go about your business. But in this time of COVID, where we're going into the summer, where all of our gigs and festivals are unfortunately being canceled, we have the time to kind of plan a recovery period. And during that time, relaxation, reflection, is essential. And when you're ready, you're going to find that creativity and motivation are going to start to come back. And that's when you can start reflecting and planning for your next period of productivity, perhaps the last 2 months of the summer. Something that happens a lot during our recovery periods, or any time where we try to decompress, is this idea that we need to be productive, this idea of guilt. And I want to challenge everybody to abandon that idea and challenge yourself to think in a more accepting term, something like, this is active recovery. This is something that is going to help me achieve sustainable growth. And just by switching that mindset, you're actually going to be able to relax, enjoy your relaxation, and reduce the anxiety associated with that mindset. Last but not least, some signs during your recovery period that you're starting to go on the right track is you're going to find that you're going to have an increased energy. You're going to find that sometimes you're going to be incredibly bored, and that is awesome, because that means you're not going to want to binge Netflix, which there's nothing wrong with that in certain circumstances. You're going to want to be productive, and this isn't wanting to be productive as it appears to have feelings of guilt, but wanting to be productive because you want to go out, you want to do something, and you want to be your best self. You're going to start feeling centered, and your levels of creativity are going to start to increase dramatically. And as this creativity starts to increase, you're going to want to start planning for other projects in the future, and you're going to find that you're going to be ready to come out of that recovery period engaged, motivated, and ready to go. If you have any questions on planning a recovery period, or anything we went over last week, or anytime throughout the presentation, feel free to post them in the chat, and I will address them at the end of the presentation. So that brings us to today's topic, performance-related injury. This is a topic that I've been researching for the past 3 years, ever since I got my first performance-related injury. And I chose a couple of studies just to kind of outline how prevalent they are in our society. So this first study by Ackerman, they gave a survey to about 300 musicians over 8 Australian orchestras, and 84% of those reported experienced pain or injury while performing on their instrument or during performing on their instrument. The second study, 357 Dutch students out of 11 student Dutch orchestras, those students, 67.8% said that they experienced performance-related injury while they're playing and away from their instrument. And the last study by Lever, 243 elite professional musicians in Britain, out of those, 86 reported regional pain within the last 12 months. And regional pain is a pain associated with a particular region of the body. And in that study, they had a list of about 8 to 10 different pain regional locations where musicians could check off if they were experiencing pain in that location. So the most common spots out of those 3 studies, we were looking at the upper back, the neck, the lower back, shoulders, and the wrists or the hands. So there are a lot of different factors that also play into performance-related injuries, including gender. All the studies across the board found that females have a higher percentage of getting a performance-related injury. They found that having a high BMI or body mass index means that you have a greater risk of performance-related injury. Posture was in the top 3 factors every single time. If you had poor posture, that contributed to a heightened chance of performance-related injury. Depending on what instrument you play, you may also be prone to certain factors, such as violin. The left wrist seemed to have a lot of performance-related injuries, but trombones wrists weren't a factor. However, the elbows were. So depending on what instrument you play and your tendencies toward that instrument, that's going to play a role in where you might be experiencing those performance-related injuries. Your daily playing time has a direct correlation to your risk of developing a performance-related injury. Anything over 4 hours and your chances of getting a performance-related injury improve drastically. And your level of fitness had a direct correlation too. They found that the higher level of fitness people had, the less likely they were to have a performance-related injury. So these are all factors that we want to consider, and these factors can all add up. The more factors you have, the greater chance you have of developing a performance-related injury. So what can we conclude from these 3 studies? Number 1, musicians are athletes. Practicing is athletic. Being in the same position with the fine motor skills needed to perform rapid movements over a period of time is an athletic event. Performance-related injuries are also prevalent in all ages. I didn't post this above, but they also did a very extensive study on musicians 18 and younger, and they found people in choirs, people in orchestras all experience performance-related injuries up to 80%. So, and the more a musician plays in a given day, the greater chance performance-related injuries. And something to keep in mind is those factors play a huge role in our risk factor percentage. And the more factors you have, the greater chance of performance-related injury we have. So I'm going to talk about the habits of long-term injury prevention, habits we can implement to help us sustainably prevent performance-related injuries over the long term. They're foundational health and wellness habits, body awareness development, functional posture development, and practice room habits. So the first one we're going to talk about is foundational health habits. These things we've talked about over the course of multiple weeks. So if it feels like I'm being repetitive, I'm bringing this back and giving you why we talked about it in the first place. The most fundamental health habit is sleep. 7 to 9, that house is supposed to be hours. 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Everybody is different though. Some people need 10, some people need 6, some people need 8, some people need 9. You know how much sleep you get, but if we start sacrificing our sleep for practicing or sacrificing our sleep for Netflix or any other kind of activity, our brain cognitive function is going to go down, our recovery periods are going to go down, and this is all going to start accumulating, which could result in burnout, fatigue, or performance-related injury. Next is hydration. We want to be proactive and drink the recommended amount of water in a day. Dehydration has a direct correlation to how efficient our body function is, how efficient our brain function is, and how efficiently the body works to perform a task. So the more dehydrated we are, the more work our body and our brain are doing to perform a task. And as we all know, to perform an instrument or any kind of skill at a high level, efficiency is key. If we're working harder than we have to, we're not going to be able to play as long. We're not going to be able to play as efficiently, and things are going to start to suffer. And on top of that, if we're dehydrated when we go to sleep, it's actually going to impact our sleep in a negative way because it's going to start to detract from the quality. And you aren't going to be able to recover that brain function for the day, and you aren't going to be able to recover from your body's physical activities for the day. Last but not least is nutrition. And this one can be confusing because not a lot of people correlate nutrition with playing an instrument, but here's how I think about it. Eating balanced meals and avoiding excess sugar, sodium, saturated fats, and processed foods helps us perform at a higher level. This is because the more sugar we have, the less glucose spikes we have. The less glucose spikes we have, basically neglects the sugar crashes that we have. If you have a sugar crash, if you have a lot of, if you eat a lot of sugar at lunch and you have a sugar crash right after, when you had a practice session planned, well, that's going to affect your practice session, whether you like it or not. You can't control that sugar crash. Next is salt. Salt directly affects our water levels in our body. It affects heart pressure. And it can, if you're a brass player, also affects the way our chops work. It affects the malleability, it affects how soft they are, and it affects how they respond to the buzz. So we want our lips to be soft, we want them to be supple, and by avoiding the excess salt, we're able to keep our lips loose and ready to go for when we have to play. Last but not least, saturated fats. That's just about longevity. If you eat butter on a regular basis, if you eat a high level of saturated fats, including animal products on a regular basis, down the road when you're 40 to 50, that could correlate to high blood pressure, a lot of other things leading to heart attack. And if you want to perform for your career by avoiding excess saturated fats, you're actually extending your career 25 to 30 years or 40 to 50 years if you're Jay Friedman, the principal trombonist of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. So that is just something we want to keep in the back of my mind, because if we're doing all of this work and all of this schooling and all this practicing just to peak at 50 and never play again, that doesn't really seem like a very fulfilling process to me. And then the processed foods, this is just a nutritional foundation. The more processed the food is, the less nutritional value it supplies. And there comes to a point where the processed food you eat is just filler and actually provides no nutrition. So I don't see the point in eating something that's going to not add to your nutritional value or add to your body or add or build energy in any kind of way. So, you know, as humans, we don't create energy. We have to eat it to create that energy. So whatever you are, what you eat in this sense. So just something to keep in mind. So the next thing I want to talk about is body awareness development. This is the second most important habit. Doing some type of activity every day that promotes the development of body awareness will help you prevent injuries in the long term. Such activities can include Alexander technique, Feldenkrais, yoga, or mobility, and not stretching. Stretching is not something that can help develop body awareness for the long term, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So what is exactly body awareness? Body awareness is the ability to understand where your body moves in space and time, how our bodies move, and how it physically feels. And the combination of all three of these things are essential for every musician. We want the ability to check in, we want the ability to tune in, and we want the ability to adjust to our physical needs in the moment. Also, something to keep in mind is that we want to know how much our body and mind can handle on a daily basis. And that's going to help you achieve balance in your daily practice and performing schedule, as a side note. So, next habit we're going to talk about is developing a functional posture. We want to do something, not every day, probably 3 to 4 to 5 times a week, to strengthen our body into a functional postural alignment. And what a functional postural alignment means, functional is any kind of exercise that translates to other areas of life. Now, if we were to apply that to postural alignment, a functional posture would be a posture that can bleed into other areas of life and serve multiple roles. So just because you can do X, Y, and Z on your instrument doesn't mean that it relates to other areas of life. But if you can bring the other areas of life into your music, it's going to help you in the sense that you're going to have more control over your posture and more control over your movements. Now, if we look at the picture on the right, the left side is something we call rounded shoulder syndrome. It's a postural imbalance and something that plagues not just musicians, but society due to the nature of looking down at our phones, staring at a computer screen and typing, or simply laying on the couch. The more our shoulders round, the more our heads come forward, the more our shoulders come forward. And if you look at the lower back, the more our lower back arches. And just coming from a sports science perspective, If our lower back is rounded like that and we're walking around, that's going to contribute to low back pain. If our shoulders are rounded like that and we're constantly putting ourselves in a position where we're working the muscles of the upper back and our arms, it's going to put extraneous stress on the shoulders, causing tension and pain. And your head weighs approximately 10 pounds. The farther your head jets forward, the more your neck muscles have to work to hold up that 10 pounds. If you ever have a bowling ball, or next time you go into a bowling alley, which at this rate might be 2022 or 23, try to hold it out and see how long you can hold it. And I guarantee you, it's not going to be very long. Your head is heavy, and that puts great stress on the spine. So as musicians, this is something we want to be actively aware of and actively proactive. We want to be proactive in combating this through strength training exercise. So there are many different things that help this, and that includes strength training, yoga, mobility, cardio, or any kind of cardiovascular activity, flexibility, and stretching. Something that I found really interesting is that there was a study by Chan, Driscoll, and Ackerman, and also side note, all of these names, these study names or people, they all help each other and they all participate in numerous studies. So I find that when I'm researching all of these studies, all of these names are basically the same. But anyway, so this study evaluated a 10-week exercise program in professional orchestra musicians. And at the end of those 10 weeks, they found a decrease in the frequency and severity of performance-related injuries, and they found an increase in performance endurance, meaning they could play at their optimum level for longer. And that's exactly why these health and wellness habits are so important to the longevity of our careers. Let's take a look at that study just a little bit in depth, specifically why it yielded such positive results. Okay, so we have three different graphs, an early, mid, and late, and that has to do with the timing of the program, and the left side is the percentage of the exercise in those stages. So if we look, we have 5 different exercises that were applied throughout the stages. We have strength, core, mobility, functional exercise, and proprioception. And proprioception is basically challenging the body's ability to recognize where it's at in space and time. So really, AKA just balance. If you went on a balance board and closed your eyes, you'd be challenging your body's proprioception to perform a specific task while grounded or on a particular item or surface. So if we look across, you're going to find that yes, the ratios fluctuate, but also that there's a balance between the 5. They all work in a holistic, synergistic way to give you a well-balanced program. And it's not one thing that prevents injury, but rather the application of different concepts in a strategic way to help you master certain elements that are essential for postural development and postural mastery. So that's just something we want to keep in mind. I thought it was fascinating because the program that I made, that I released yesterday, and the sign up is still on Monday, actually combines all of these elements. And this is something that I looked at 3 years ago when this first came out, and I thought it was really fascinating. And I didn't look at it again until last week and realized, wow, I actually did that. So that's really cool to see that this kind of program actually was able to help performance-related injuries over the course of this 10 weeks. Just fascinating. So the last thing we want to talk about here are practice room habits, and this has to do with when we're actually on the instrument. And I'm sure these all sound very, very similar. There's literally hundreds of articles, if you Google, that all cover these different things. So basically, we want to have a short warm-up routine for your body before you actually play the instrument. We want to establish breaks and mini breaks throughout our practice sessions, so we're not just playing constantly for 45 minutes. After you're done playing your instrument, you want to cool down and warm down your body and check your range of motion. And then you also want to plan out your practice time and plan out those mini breaks so you can hold yourself accountable. If you go into a practice session and you don't really know what you're going to practice, you could practice an etude for half an hour and not realize it. That's just the nature of playing music and being immersed in something that it can be an out-of-body experience. Okay, so we went over all of that very, very fast. I had too much coffee today, so I apologize for that. If there are any questions, I would love to take them. And if not, then this might be a good time to wrap up. To review, I want to go back to these habits of long-term injury prevention. It's really about the foundational health and wellness habits, nutrition, hydration, and sleep, body awareness development, functional posture development, and practice room habits. All four of these different types of habits help with the longevity of our careers and help with the longevity of our performance careers. And if you are looking for a program, like I said, I do have a 30-day musician health and wellness challenge, thefunctionalmusician.com, and sign up ends this coming Monday, and it involves all of these different health and wellness habits, and we actually track those for you and give you instructional videos on how to develop that. So, are there any questions at this moment? All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you got something from these series. If you missed one, we will be programming these on Facebook Live sometime in the coming weeks. I hope everybody's staying safe and healthy, and I hope you have a good rest of your Tuesday.